All right, praising God for the lessons that once again he can bring us through repetition. Let's call this chapter Do Not Rejoice, going back to Proverbs 24, verses 17 through 18 that read, Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn away his anger from him, potentially turning it toward us when we too enthusiastically celebrate the fall of others. Going back to some things that we saw in Ezekiel 25, when we saw in a family relationship, the Ammonites celebrate seemingly too much the fall of Israel, understanding that the Ammonites were the descendants of Lot, close kin to Abraham, likewise a forefather of the Israelites. Ammon's resentment was going to make sure that their fall was going to come not too far after Israel's stumble as well. And so here we have a similar interfamily resentment producing the same pattern. Israel's fall is going to produce a fall in the people of Mount Seir, who, as I've looked them up, seem to be the places or those who dwell or descended from. Mount Seir seems to be the home of those who descended from Edom, the brother of Jacob, otherwise known as Israel. Understanding that now we're looking at two nations that essentially descended from an old family squabble. This chapter, quite possibly like the chapter regarding Ammon, reminding us of the need not only to take care of our resentment, but especially to be careful of the resentment that we have between family members, understanding that the people of God or Christians are described as the family of God, regardless of blood kinship. Understanding all that in the way of preamble, let's just get into the chapter and realize that we really could subtitle this because it breaks down into four because statements setting forth the reason why God is sending Ezekiel to prophesy against Mount Seir. Again, the ESV does a pretty good job, as I see it, of breaking down the thoughts in chapters. And so we'll look at those four because statements first from the perspective of the first chapter paragraph. Good night. That goes from verse 1 through 9. Verse 5 beginning, because you cherished perpetual enmity and gave over the people of Israel to the power of the sword at the time of their calamity, at the time of their final punishment, reminding us once again, Israel is not perfect, but God is reminding us of the whole concept of proportionality. You do not have permission to punish people beyond what justice requires them to be punished. Understanding that God is still a factor in limiting the reasonableness of the punishment that Israel is due at this point. He's going to go on to give us another because statement in verse 6 where he says, because you did not hate bloodshed, therefore blood shall pursue you, reminding us of Jesus' statement as we have seen periodically in the Sermon on the Mount, where, as we said, since we were about yay high, we have seen the whole concept of with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you, both for the positive, but in these judgment passages for the negative. Understanding that when you do not understand how to show mercy, you're basically setting forth the standard with which God will deal with you in your own day of judgment. Going on in verses 10 through 12, that second paragraph, we get another because statement. The first portion of that because statement stating, because you said these two nations, these two countries shall be mine, and we shall take possession of them, although the Lord was there. That one reminds us that God was present, setting forth the standard of what just punishment was for Israel. And to the degree Edom went too far, God is now going to repay them, because in the latter half of verse 12, going through the end of the chapter, we're going to see the second part of that because we just read in verse 10, where it is going to say, and you went further in verse 13 to magnify yourselves against me with your mouth. Understanding that in life, there are times when if we see ourselves failing and kind of have a little bit of envy or resentment built up, as I kind of skipped over verse 11 saying, I will deal with you according to the anger and envy that you showed because of your hatred against them, Israel. There are times when we can be tempted to envy someone and we feel that we can't possibly catch up to the pace that they're setting. We celebrate a little bit too much when they fail. And that is the trap that Edom has fallen into here, as the last because statement is going to seem to come in verse 15, where it says, as you rejoiced over the inheritance of the house of Israel because it was desolate, so I will deal with you and you shall be desolate. Then they will know that I am the Lord. A repeating theme for the way in which God emphasizes not only that he exists, but the standards by which he chooses to help us understand, among other things, justice. Here, reminding the people of Mount Seir, quite possibly the people of Edom, of a question it might be wise for all of us to consider, and that is, when we are tempted to find joy in the fall of others, are we really more righteous than the people whose fall we are celebrating? A question that still matters. Understanding chapters like this remind us of the way that God has a tendency to bring into seasons of failure those who have wrongly celebrated the failure of others.